All right, speaker number one, Ralph Dieter, DTN, current Vice President of Public Relations of Route 66, past Division A Governor, Division A Director, as well as Area A4 Director, giving his qualifying speech. It's 18 to 20 minutes. Tomorrow will be a better day. Tomorrow will be a better day. Ralph Dieter.
Tomorrow will be a better day. Without hope, you're lost or even dead. This is a story of one family's answer to Holocaust deniers and one family's immigration story. It is also an attempt to avoid getting submerged in the melting pot. My story begins with my father Olaf's story growing up in Nazi Germany as being half Jewish. He was born in the Czech Republic, and at age 3, he immigrated with his mother to Frankfurt, Germany. It was never easy for him growing up because Germans at that time didn't trust people who were born elsewhere. But my father adapted to his environment until one day a bitter stepfather turned him into the Gestapo for being half Jewish. Feeling betrayed and desperate, and knowing he was facing a slow death, he was told he had to appear at the train station for deportation. There's a euphemism. So he was sent to a okay. He was sent to a concentration camp for forced labor with his head held high, and he adapted to his environment. People there worked in the harshest of environments until they couldn't work anymore because of injury or sickness, and then death usually followed. 1 in 3 died in this camp. 1 in 3. How did my father and others survive? They had strong mental toughness. For my father, it was tomorrow will be a better day. Hope, resilience. Tomorrow will be a better day finally came with liberation by Patton's Third Army. The U.S. Army saved my father's life. Otherwise, I would be making this speech. My mother, Ilse, had her own story. She was born in a poor farming region, and she and her family lived in a rundown old grain mill in the middle of the farm. Oh, slow. This takes a little time. She developed a quiet toughness, like most farm girls do. She found out that she had an intelligence she didn't know she had, in school. And she developed great strength working on the farm. And when she couldn't find a job of any other kind, this helped her join a performance troupe on the high wire. Because performers have to be very strong to control themselves on the high wire. My father carried the group's equipment in a truck. He got a job, even though jobs were very hard to find. I mean, people didn't even have enough food to keep from occasionally starving. But after the war, he developed his own trucking company. He carried the troops' equipment around. They performed in various places all over post-war Germany. You could see the ruins because of the bombing. And this is when my father and my mother fell in love, when they were in a location called Garmisch. It was a beautiful resort location, but then something happened that was very difficult. They had a performer who drove a motorcycle on the high wire, and he fell off and was killed. So my mother and father decided to quit the troupe after that. My family, I mean, I came along in 1950, but my family had a difficult time because it was almost impossible to find an apartment or food sources. Because of the 70% destruction that happened to Frankfurt in the bombing, apartments were so hard to find. But with my father's attitude of tomorrow will be a better day, we were able to find one. It wasn't much, one room and a bathroom that we had to share with other families. My parents decided that they wanted to improve their lives. And they started considering immigrating to the US. But it wouldn't be easy, because the family was getting reparations from the German government, because my father was a concentration camp survivor. And it was just very difficult for them to live. There was something else too. Germans around my father always whispered things like, "Der da, der ist Jude." That guy's a Jew. My father had enough of hearing that kind of stuff. And that made him even more strongly inclined to leave Germany. But as I said, it wasn't easy, because they'd have to give up things like the reparations from the German government. And also my father had gotten another job when his trucking company failed. He got a job with the American military in Frankfurt. He had a certain hiring preference because he'd been a concentration camp inmate. So they'd have to give up that job with the Americans too. But my parents were still strongly inclined to leave Germany. So the die was cast, as Julius Caesar said. We left our precious apartment and moved into an internment camp for refugees. Actually, it was a prison camp because once you went into the camp, they didn't automatically let you out. We all had intensive physical exams because the US government didn't want to let disease-ridden immigrants into the country. That wasn't all. US Army intelligence officers interrogated my parents to see if they were communists or Nazis. When the authorities were finally convinced that we were healthy, regular people, we were released from the camp and moved to a holding camp in Bremerhaven, a port on the North Sea. Dad's mantra got us through again. And then the day came when we were about to embark on an old Liberty ship for the 2 to 3 week journey between Bremerhaven and New Orleans in the US. My grandmother stood on the dock and cried so hard that her body was visibly shaking. Both she and my mother knew that they probably would never see each other again. When the day came that we were about to disembark in New Orleans, the skipper of the ship decided that he would delay a day in docking so we would arrive on June 14th, 1951, Flag Day. Eagerly and excitedly, my parents came down the gangplank to first step foot in the land of unlimited opportunities. But my parents were in for a big shock. My father went into a bathroom and everybody stared at it. Like, what are you doing in here? And my father's first thoughts were, oh no, not again, not here in the US. My mother and I were sitting on a park bench and we received the same look from a woman sitting on the other end of the park bench. What was going on? We surveyed the area and then we understood. The bathroom was designated for Black people. My father had seen this kind of thing in Nazi Germany happening to the Jews. Again, fear entered his body. He didn't think he'd ever have that happen here. That's why we came here. But in any case, turns out that German lawyers had observed Jim Crow laws at work in the South during the 30s. So the Nazis' segregation system between Jews and non-Jews had been influenced by the Jim Crow South. We decided to not do any sightseeing and proceed to our permanent residence. So we hopped on a train and traveled to Petaluma, California, north of San Francisco. Tomorrow will be a better day had arrived for us. We were grateful to the Lutheran World Relief Organization, which arranged an introduction with a Lutheran church that had sponsored us. When you're an immigrant, if you want things to flow smoothly, you have to have a sponsor. For the first few days, we lived behind the curtain of a multipurpose room of the church. Then my father got his first job in this country working in a lumber yard. A parishioner-owned lumber yard. The same parishioner gave us our first apartment. But then we really began to understand the difference in living standards. We got our first single-family house. It had 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for my parents. It had a bathroom that only my family used. What a difference between our house and the apartment in Frankfurt. No more complaints about an occupied bathroom because we were the only occupants. My parents began to achieve all the things they had dreamed about. They went to a local community college and conquered their language problems and received degrees. Tomorrow was a better day. My mother continued her education at San Francisco State and became a 5th grade teacher. She went on to achieve 2 master's degrees, one in special reading problems and one in marriage and family therapy. She had a 16-year counseling practice. Not bad for a poor farm girl who only made it to the 8th grade in the old country. My father got a job as a psychiatric technician in an institution for the developmentally disabled. By the way, the Nazis also sent developmentally disabled people to concentration camps. So my father had great pleasure in serving the developmentally disabled population and high respect from his colleagues. Again, tomorrow was a better day. When my parents, even after they retired, they still had very important things that they did. My father was highly incensed by this Holocaust denial stuff that we see nowadays. So we began lecturing to organizations that were dedicated to Holocaust remembrance, to educational institutions and religious institutions of all faiths until almost the day that he died in 2014. But the pain that came from his persecution stayed with him almost to the day he died. And he even cried about 2 weeks before he died. But nevertheless, he still had an attitude of tomorrow will be a better day, right to the end. My mother retired from her counseling practice and became active in her church, especially her choir. Their choir toured Europe, performed in Germany, and even in St. Petersburg, Russia. She taught her three children. I was one of them. Until she passed in 2019. My parents' experiences of hunger and hope and resilience gave me a safe haven to be who I became. Their wisdom helped me to be successful. I achieved the top 10 ranking in my high school of 500 students. But it wasn't all fun and games. Before kindergarten, they had told my parents that I had to stop speaking German at home, or I wouldn't, I'd have difficulty in school. That didn't prove to be correct. I continued with my service in the U.S. Army, serving in various places in the U.S. And after I got out, I continued my education and got a PhD in economics. I went into corporate management in various corporations, including Intel Corporation and United Airlines, and finished my working life as a professor of economics. I will continue learning until I pass from this earth, just as my parents encouraged me to do. I have seen the learning opportunities in Toastmasters. And I know in my heart anybody know what this insignia is? Military intelligence. And I know in my heart that tomorrow will be a better day. Mr. Toastmaster.